The people that I know that have taken acid, we can look out at the other people that haven't, and they can tell us we're crazy, and we can say, well, you haven't seen anything yet, because there are things that are more beautiful.
So what happens is, because we've got these two conflicting views, we've got the old propaganda.
LSD? LSD, huh? Where would she get a thing like that?
You know, what our governments tell us, that illegal drugs are all dangerous, and now we've got a lot of new research.
So by 2021, I think we will have legal access to MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder, psilocybin for depression.
Where a lot of people now are seeing them as not so dangerous, and they're seeing them as tools that can help heal past trauma.
The fact is, the laws about many substances were passed with total disregard for the evidence.
And what ends up happening is there's still a shit ton of misinformation. Because in order to offset all that old propaganda,
now people like to say just how safe these compounds are, while kind of neglecting to mention some of the very real negatives.
In other words, there's a lot of people who get into, say, tripping on acid, and they mistakenly believe that it's just totally safe, and they end up hurting themselves, or, you know, worse.
And he spins into a situation where he is virtually buried alive in a chemical tomb.
Which then goes on to help prove the point of all of these sheep who believe that all these compounds are just bad. And that was a bad joke. Which is why I welcome all of you to the first installment of Risk versus Reward. Before we get started, I'd like to share a quick message with the Google employee who will be reviewing this video and whether it passes the community guidelines or not. The following presentation has been created for both harm reduction and safety. According to YouTube's own community guidelines shown here, videos which intend to educate but do not glorify substance use are generally suitable for advertising. The following video does not glorify the use of drugs. In fact, it educates the user on what safe use should be. It is also not graphic, since it does not show the consumption of any illegal substances or legal substances. The following video is strictly educational. As you can see, we have made our intent as clear as we can, and we thank you for your consideration. Now, I'm going to assume that through watching this video, you already know what LSD is. But for those of you who don't, LSD is a psychedelic compound which was first popularized in the 1960s. It's derived from ergot fungus. It is active at very tiny doses in the microgram range, meaning you'd have a difficult time even seeing an active dose with the naked eye.
Please keep in mind, this is not an exhaustive list, because such a video would be far too long. Instead, these are what I personally believe to be the most dangerous risks and valuable rewards that anyone who's curious about LSD needs to know. The first risk is one that a lot of you guys are tired of hearing me talk about. Just because you have a blotter that is supposedly containing a psychedelic compound, which may have been sold to you as LSD, well, that doesn't actually mean that your blotter has LSD. In fact, there's dozens. There's over 100 compounds that are active in similar dose ranges as LSD is, one of the most popular ones being NBOMe. However, this risk is easily mitigated simply by using the Ehrlich reagent. All you do is cut a little corner off your tab, drip a drop of this stuff on there, and assuming it turns purple, well, that means that you have an indole alkaloid, which is most likely going to be LSD, and not a dangerous NBOMe compound. On the flip side of that, the reward is, if you do have LSD, there has currently been no one who's been confirmed to have been killed simply by an LSD overdose. It's non-habit forming, it's not addictive, and it's known to be physically safe. The risk is just because something is physically safe, it can actually give a misguided view of what the drug can do to people. People see physically safe and they think, oh, nothing bad's gonna happen. I'm gonna be okay. I can take high doses or even average doses and just have a blast, go to a party, go out to a bar on acid. When this is not the case, just because it's physically safe, it does not mean that it can't be mentally dangerous. There have been many instances where just one bad trip has caused someone to have long-lasting post-traumatic stress disorder. This compound can be so powerful, and it can show you things about your own psyche that you may not be ready to face. It can show you repressed memories or repressed emotions, or it can just make you feel like you're trapped in infinity with a bunch of demons that your friends have transformed into, which can easily lead to extreme trauma, long-lasting depression, and even anxiety. People with latent mental disorders, or even who are showing slight symptoms of schizophrenia, it can actually exacerbate their mental disorder, and it can bring it on sooner if they were going to get it anyway. As for the reward, LSD is not known to cause
mental disorders. It cannot cause something like schizophrenia. LSD cannot make you go crazy. It's a drug. Well, it's inside your body, inside your brain, you receive its effects. But once it's run its course and it's exited the brain, you are no longer going to be tripping. As for the risk, well, the drug is in effect, you definitely can feel crazy. LSD has caused psychotic episodes in people to the point where they have hurt themselves, hurt others, or well, done things like committed suicide because they believe that the only way to end the trip, kind of like in a bad dream, is to die. A really bad traumatic trip can feel like you're in a living nightmare. In the sober state, it's very difficult to comprehend or imagine the type of terror that an individual will be going through when it feels like they are trapped in infinity and say they're just dying on repeat over and over and over again. You have to keep in mind, these people don't know at this point that they're under the influence of a drug. As far as a lot of them are concerned, they've already died, and now they've moved on to the next level, and they're just experiencing some form of hell, and they're desperate to find a way out of it. As for the reward, I mean, how could there be a reward for a risk that big? Well, you can seriously mitigate the possibility of having a dangerous, life-threatening experience through following some very simple harm reduction practices. Things like fully understanding what you're getting yourself into, actually preparing for the experience properly and ensuring that you are in the right mental state before you take something, and even if you are feeling just completely tip-top and perfect, you also should always have something called a trip sitter with you, which is kind of like, well, when you're in that state it is, like a babysitter. In almost all instances when someone has, say, killed themselves under the influence of a psychedelic, it was because they took it alone. If they had had a trip sitter with them to watch them and to make sure, say, they didn't run out into traffic, that would have never happened. You can also do things such as always starting low and then slowly titrating your dose up until you reach a point that you are comfortable with. So simply being aware that you must always have the most ideal set and setting is, I mean, it's kind of beaten to death. Most people who trip know this, but it really is the most important thing. Another often overlooked risk is unwanted spiritual or religious experiences. Now, a lot of you guys might be thinking, why would you not want something like spiritual enlightenment or to meet God? Well, the truth is, depending on where a person is in their life or depending on what they want to believe, these types of encounters really can cause long-lasting trauma. People say that LSD can change your life forever. Sometimes people just aren't ready for this shift. Even myself, in the past when I was exploring these compounds, I personally had experiences which made me, at least at the time, feel like I had all of these secret answers to the universe, and because of this, I felt this incredible amount of responsibility towards others, and it was just something that I wasn't ready to carry, and it gave me a lot of anxiety. On the flip side, the reward here is that there are people out there who are looking for these experiences. There's people who, say, practice meditation daily, and they're looking to try something like LSD to maybe put them in that SATORI or Kensho state.
I feel like I'm everything and nothing at the same time.
However, I do have to mention that just because these compounds can be spiritual for certain people, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who trips is going to even have the potential to have one of these enlightening experiences. Also, a lot of people think that having an enlightening trip has to do with the dose. While dose can play a part for certain individuals, it's not necessary or even sometimes warranted.
I'm in a place so outside of my element, you know?
It would appear to me that achieving something like spiritual enlightenment is going to be more prone to happen to people who are already maybe on their way there. The same can be said for people who are using a psychedelic to maybe get over trauma. The risk is they can cause trauma, but the reward is they can help people through traumatic experiences, through allowing the individual to really connect to their true, genuine self. There can come a point where people forget that they've actually been lying to themselves and that how they present themselves to the world isn't necessarily who they are. They're just kind of this collection of bullshit. And what can happen, I mean, I used to be one of them, but what can happen is you can take one of these compounds and all of a sudden it just washes in, and all of those lies that you've been believing and feeding yourself just become so apparent. It's like you can just see it all crystal clear laid out in front of you, like this really hideous mural that you've been trying to look away from forever. This can often lead people down a path of self-discovery and healing. Of course, the risk is you are not guaranteed a good experience, especially if you're the kind of person who always has to be in control of situations and who can't let go. People who can easily submit to an experience and surrender, and who maybe don't attach guilt and shame to the act of surrendering. People who can just let the molecule, just take them on a ride without trying to even stop it when things get a little intense, those are the type of people who are going to have a better time. But then timing came into play. Ooh, timing. I'm progressively getting weirder and weirder.
Yeah.
People who can't let go can sometimes be in for more of a challenge because they might fight what's happening to them. And when you go against it and you push against the experience, it pushes back, sometimes to the point where it just fully engulfs you, and before you know it, you're terrified because all you want is to get some control, and to get that control, you need to get your mind back to normal, and you're just constantly trying to think yourself out of the trip, but you can't think a drug out of your mind. You're stuck with it. But of course, this risk can be easily remedied by following these simple set and setting guidelines, making sure that your set is good, making sure that you feel good in your life, that you feel good about yourself even that day is important, and your setting, making sure that you're in a comfortable, safe environment. But the risk is, no matter how safe or good about yourself you feel at the time, LSD is still known to be very unpredictable. Especially because under the influence, a user can be very suggestible to ideas and notions from others, or even just their own thoughts. It can be very easy for someone to latch on to one negative thought, and that propagates into more negative, nasty thoughts, where they can get actually stuck in what we call thought loops, where they're just constantly thinking about that same nasty thought over and over again. All it really takes to push someone from a good experience to a bad experience can be just that one negative thought.
My penis is always shriveled.
On the flip side, this is very easy to avoid. You simply do need to have a good trip sitter with you. An experienced trip sitter will be able to tell when someone's stuck in one of these negative thought loops, and they'll easily course correct them through usually very simple actions.
Like you hear everything, all the little people, I hear something going on.
It's a little bit of sensory overload.
For example, if someone's sitting down, moving them, getting them to stand up and walk around, or even if they were inside, taking them outside, if they were outside, taking them inside, that can dramatically shift someone's train of thoughts, especially while they're so suggestible. Also, just something like changing the music, turning off music, or putting on something that they pre-selected that's calm and happy, that can cause a huge shift. The problem is when you yourself are going down one of these negative thought loop paths, you don't realize how easy it is to change things. You don't know how suggestible or susceptible you are. And that's why you need someone sober with you to show you. Often when someone does change location and they start feeling better, they think, oh my God, wow, I can't believe how good I feel just to get up and move. And now they're on the train of following good thoughts again. It's just really easy to jump between trains. As for another risk, there are long-lasting negative effects that can happen to some people, particularly what's called HPPD, hallucination persisting perception disorder. Now, things like flashbacks are non-existent. All flashbacks really are is, say somebody tried acid and then a few days later they smoke weed. Whoa. The weed is more psychedelic than it ever was in the past. That can be attributed to, now that their mind's been opened a little bit, that door just doesn't always fully shut. But HPPD is something different. This is characterized by, after the trip, you still never 100% feel normal.
Whether it would normally be negative or... And that concluded that test.
Do you hear that sound?
Yeah.
It sounds different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It always looks grainy. They call this visual snow, or everything just always looks brighter. Even mental aspects of it is they can feel depersonalization, where they no longer feel like themselves, or they're even really connected to their body. On the flip side of this, HPPD is not likely, or at least anecdotally, it doesn't often occur. It's actually very rare. But even if you do have it, regardless of how it came on, it's not permanent, and it will go away with time, especially if you refrain from psychedelics, or also refrain from all drugs in general. To answer the question as to whether the risks really do outweigh the rewards, well, I hope you guys kind of get the gist of things by now and you realize that that's not a question that I can answer. That's an individual question that you have to ask yourself. If through watching this video you've realized that maybe you're somebody who is prone to anxiety attacks, you feel paranoid in your everyday life, maybe you've got a mental disorder currently that you're battling with, you might watch this and realize, hey, I don't think that's for me, I'm going to avoid that one. Or maybe you're someone who's watching this video and you're going through depression and you think that LSD is just what you need to unearth some of the reasons for your sadness. Of course, if you are tripping and you're already depressed, you are at greater risk, but it's a really touchy subject because at the same time, it has helped some people. It's really just up to you and whether you can take responsibility for whatever happens kind of deal, and yeah, accept the good with the bad. At the end of the day, the decision to trip on acid or to really try any drug lies with the individual. And my point of view is it's better if we educate people on what all the risks and rewards can be right from the get-go, so they can make an educated decision and they aren't going into this blindfolded, because most dangers happen that are associated with either legal or illegal drugs when people aren't fully aware of what they're getting themselves into. Another huge risk I forgot to mention is that LSD is illegal in most countries. This means if you were ever caught with any on you, you can be risking a criminal record and possible jail time. This risk on its own is large enough to frighten many people away from ever trying it, and understandably so. And another huge reward I forgot to mention is that along with healing trauma, LSD is also known to cure dangerous drug addictions. For me personally, it was thanks to psychedelics that I was able to quit a 10-year-long tobacco addiction, not to mention an on and off struggle with alcohol.
Incredible. It's as if I'm hearing notes that I've never heard before. Everything seems as if it's in 4K, and if you don't mind me saying this, all your fans are going to make a lot of money, and they are going to be very successful.
Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, be sure you leave it a like, and if you enjoy my content, you can check out our Patreon page. We are fully funded by you amazing people, and if you support what I do here, then your pledge keeps us going. Till next time, stay safe everybody, always test your compounds. There's a link to a test kit in the video description, and also let me know if you enjoyed this concept. I've never done a risk versus reward video before, and I kind of wanted to make this a new series because this was a lot of fun, and I like kind of dismantling both sides of the argument. Anyway, let me know what compound you would like to see me cover next. See you guys later.
Always shriveled. Probably because I need to get laid more often.